There are moments in a reporter's life that stay with you long after the cameras stop rolling. Moments that remind you that beneath the headlines and the glamour, we're all just people trying to find our way. I experienced one such moment on a humid August afternoon in 1962 in the back corner of a nearly empty diner on the outskirts of Trenton, New Jersey. Marlon Brando was sitting across from me in a cracked vinyl booth, methodically tearing a paper napkin into thin strips. He hadn't said a word in almost 5 minutes. The waitress, an elderly woman with tired eyes and sensible shoes, had just brought our coffee, and Brando was staring at his reflection in the dark liquid as if searching for something he'd lost. This wasn't an interview. This wasn't planned. And what he told me that afternoon about fame, about fear, about the terrible loneliness of being seen by everyone and known by no one, I've carried with me for decades. What happened next would change the way I understood celebrity, humanity, and the masks we all wear. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Let me take you back to how that afternoon began, because the context matters. It was August 9th, a Thursday if memory serves, and I was driving from Philadelphia to New York after covering a story about municipal corruption, the kind of dry, important work that rarely makes headlines, but matters to the fabric of our democracy. My producer had taken the train back that morning, but I decided to drive. I wanted time to think, to process what I'd learned, to let my mind wander the way it does on long stretches of highway. Route 1 in those days was nothing like the interstates we have now. It was a two-lane road that wound through small towns and past farmland, where you could still see America the way it used to be. Elm trees lined portions of the road, their branches creating tunnels of green shade. Small businesses, family-owned gas stations, roadside fruit stands, modest motels dotted the landscape. The radio in my Chevrolet played a mixture of news and music, though I'd mostly turned it down to enjoy the quiet. I'd been driving for about an hour when the car started making a troubling sound, a rhythmic knocking from under the hood that suggested something serious was amiss with the engine. The temperature gauge was climbing toward the red zone. I knew enough about automobiles to know I needed to stop immediately. I pulled into the first service station I could find, a modest Esso station attached to a small diner called Ruthie's Place. The station consisted of 2 pumps, a small garage bay, and a cramped office with a Coca-Cola machine out front. The diner next door was a silver railroad car-style building, the kind that had been popular in the 30s and 40s, with a red and white striped awning over the entrance. The mechanic, a young man in his mid-20s with oil-stained hands and an honest face, listened to my engine and shook his head with the gravity of a doctor delivering bad news. "Water pump's going," he said. "Maybe the thermostat too. I can fix it, but you're looking at 2, maybe 3 hours. I've got to finish up another job first." So I did what any reasonable person would do. I walked next door to Ruthie's Place for lunch and coffee while I waited. The diner was exactly what you'd expect. Chrome fixtures that had been polished thousands of times. Red vinyl booths patched here and there with electrical tape. A long counter with spinning stools, most of them occupied by ghosts of countless previous customers. Black and white checkered linoleum floor. The smell of coffee, frying onions, and pie. A jukebox in the corner playing Patsy Cline's Crazy, which seemed oddly appropriate for the moment. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon, that dead zone between lunch and dinner when restaurants take a breath. Only a handful of customers remained. An elderly couple sat at the counter, speaking in low tones over slices of apple pie. A truck driver occupied a booth near the front, working his way through a plate of meatloaf. And in the very last booth, the one in the corner where the afternoon light from the windows didn't quite reach, sat a man in dark sunglasses. I chose a booth in the middle, away from both the windows and the other customers, and ordered coffee and a turkey sandwich from the waitress. She was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of efficiency that comes from 30 years of working the lunch shift. She brought my coffee in a heavy ceramic mug, the kind that stays hot, and disappeared back behind the counter. I had a newspaper with me, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I spread it out on the formica table, intending to catch up on the news I'd missed while working. But I found myself distracted by the man in the corner booth. He wore dark sunglasses despite being indoors. A plain white T-shirt, slightly wrinkled. Work pants, a brown leather jacket lay on the seat beside him. His hair was dark, a bit longer than was fashionable, and he hadn't shaved in several days. He sat very still, hands wrapped around his coffee cup, staring at nothing in particular. Something about his posture, the line of his shoulders, the way he held his head was familiar. I glanced at him a few more times over the next several minutes, trying to place him, and then it clicked. Marlon Brando. There was no mistaking him once I really looked. That distinctive profile, the powerful build, the way he commanded space, even while sitting perfectly still. This was the man who had revolutionized American acting with A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. the man whose face appeared on magazine covers across the country, the biggest movie star in America, sitting alone in a roadside diner in New Jersey, looking like any working man taking a break from an ordinary day. I'm a journalist. My instinct is always to approach, to ask questions, to get the story. But I'm also a human being who believes in privacy and dignity. Whatever had brought Marlon Brando to this particular diner on this particular afternoon, he clearly wanted to be left alone, and I respected that. So I returned to my newspaper and my coffee, occasionally glancing up but being careful not to stare. The waitress refilled my coffee. The elderly couple finished their pie and left. The truck driver paid his check and headed back to his rig. The jukebox played Roy Orbison's Only the Lonely. Outside through the window, I could see the mechanic working on my car, his upper body disappearing under the hood. About 20 minutes passed in comfortable silence. I was reading an article about the space program when I became aware of someone standing beside my booth. I looked up. Marlon Brando had removed his sunglasses and was looking at me with those intense dark eyes that had captivated audiences around the world. "You're Walter Cronkite," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I acknowledged, setting down my newspaper. "I've been watching you for the last 20 minutes. He spoke quietly, his voice that distinctive mumble that would become famous, though it was clearer than people might expect. "You recognized me, didn't you? There was no point in lying. I did. But you didn't come over, didn't ask for an autograph, didn't want to talk." He tilted his head slightly, studying me with the same intensity he brought to his performances. "Why not?" I considered the question. "Because you're having a cup of coffee, Mr. Brando. Same as me." I saw no reason to interrupt that. He stood there for a moment, absorbing this. Then, to my surprise, he gestured to the seat across from me. "May I sit?" "Of course." He slid into the booth, setting his sunglasses on the table between us. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his face. Not physical tiredness, but something deeper, a weariness of the soul that comes from carrying a burden too long. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress appeared, topped off both our coffees, and vanished again with the practiced discretion of someone who has learned not to intrude. I could tell she'd recognized him. There was a slight widening of her eyes, but she said nothing. Brando picked up one of the paper napkins from the metal dispenser and began tearing it into thin, even strips. His hands were in constant motion, as if stillness was impossible for him. "Do you know what it's like," he began suddenly, not looking at me, but at the napkin he was methodically destroying, "to be recognized everywhere you go, but never actually seen?" I thought about that carefully before answering. "I imagine it must be very lonely." Lonely. He repeated the word as if testing its weight. That's one way to describe it, but it's more than that. It's like being a photograph of yourself. People see the image, they recognize the image, but the actual person might as well be invisible. He arranged the strips of napkin into parallel lines on the table, precise and ordered. "I'm driving from Los Angeles to New York," he continued. "Do you want to know why I'm driving instead of flying? Flying would take 4 hours. Door to door, maybe 6. But I'm driving because I need time. Time alone. Time to think. Time to remember who I am when I'm not performing." "What takes you to New York?" I asked. A bitter smile crossed his face. "The business of being Marlon Brando. Meetings with my agent. Contracts to review and sign. Decisions to make about which studio gets to rent me next." He said it with such disdain that I understood immediately. He saw himself not as an artist, but as a commodity. "You don't enjoy acting?" I asked. "I love acting," he said, and for the first time there was genuine passion in his voice. Acting itself, the craft, the work, the exploration of character and truth, I love that more than anything. But I hate what comes with it. The fame, the publicity, the constant performance of being myself, or rather, of being who everyone thinks I am. He pushed the napkin strips around like pieces on a chessboard. "I just came from a meeting in Los Angeles, a party, actually, at a producer's house in Beverly Hills. 100 people, maybe more. Actors, directors, studio executives, all the important people. And for 2 hours I played Marlon Brando. I was charming when it served me. I was difficult when that was more useful. I made witty observations and told interesting stories. I performed the role of the brilliant, unpredictable artist, and I was very convincing. But it wasn't real," I said quietly. "Nothing about my life is real anymore, Mr. Cronkite. That's what I'm trying to tell you." He looked directly at me then, and I saw genuine pain in his eyes. "Every interaction is a performance. Every photograph, every interview, every public appearance. I've become so good at being Marlon Brando, the movie star, that I've forgotten how to be Bud Brando from Omaha." The jukebox had gone quiet. The diner was completely still except for the distant sound of the mechanic's tools on my car. "My mother used to call me Bud," he said, his voice softer now. "She died in 1954. Alcoholism. She was a beautiful woman, talented but broken by life and by my father. Before she died, she told me she was proud of me, proud of my success. But I wonder sometimes if she was proud of who I'd become, or proud of how well I'd learned to pretend. He was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. I was at her funeral, and people recognized me. Even then, even at my mother's funeral, people wanted autographs, wanted to tell me how much they loved my work. And I signed the autographs and smiled and thanked them, because that's what Marlon Brando does. But Bud Brando, Bud wanted to scream at them, to leave him alone, to let him grieve, to let him be human for just one goddamn day. I didn't know what to say to that. What do you say to someone carrying that kind of pain? I'm sorry. I offered. I'm truly sorry. He waved it away. Don't be sorry. I chose this. I worked for this. I wanted to be a great actor, and I am. I wanted fame and recognition, and I have them. This is what I asked for. I just didn't understand the price. The waitress came by again, warming our coffee without asking, leaving the check face down on the table. Through the window, I could see my car being lowered from the jack. The repair was nearly complete. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Brando asked suddenly. Of course. Sometimes I think about just disappearing, walking away from all of it, changing my name, moving to some small town in Montana or Oregon where nobody knows who Marlon Brando is, getting a regular job, having regular conversations with regular people about regular things, being nobody special, just another face in the crowd. Why don't you? I asked. He laughed, a short, sad sound, because I've signed contracts worth millions of dollars, because hundreds of people depend on me for their livelihoods, because I've become an industry, and industries don't get to close down just because they're tired. He paused, and because I'm afraid. Of what? That if I stopped being Marlon Brando, the actor, I'd discover there's nothing underneath. That I've given so much of myself to the characters I've played, Stanley Kowalski, Terry Malloy, all of them, that there's no authentic self left, that I am nothing but performances all the way down. He looked out the window at the passing traffic. Do you know what terrifies me most, Mr. Cronkite? The possibility that the real Marlon Brando died somewhere along the way, maybe years ago, and nobody noticed, not even me. That I've been performing for so long that I can't stop, that even when I'm alone, I'm still acting. The honesty of it was devastating. Here was this man, this symbol of masculine power and artistic genius, admitting to a fundamental crisis of identity. May I offer an observation? I said carefully. He nodded. The fact that you're asking these questions suggests there's still someone home. A person who's just performing doesn't question the performance. They don't drive across country to find themselves. They don't sit in diners wondering who they are. The questioning itself is proof of authenticity. He considered this, turning it over in his mind. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just very good at performing authenticity too. I don't think so, I said. I've interviewed hundreds of people, Mr. Brando. Politicians, generals, celebrities. I've developed a sense for when someone is performing and when they're being real. Right now, in this moment, you're real. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. You're a kind man, Mr. Cronkite. Thank you for that. Outside, the mechanic was wiping his hands on a red rag, the universal signal that the work was done. My time in this strange, unexpected conversation was coming to an end. I should let you go, Brando said, noticing the same thing. Your car is ready. So it is. I reached for the check, but he was faster. Let me, he said. It's the least I can do for the gift of being nobody for an hour. We stood up together. He put his sunglasses back on, transforming instantly from vulnerable human to movie star. The mask coming back down, he pulled on his leather jacket and picked up his own check from his booth. We walked to the register together. The waitress rang us up without ceremony, without asking for an autograph, without acknowledging that she'd just served one of the most famous men in America. I appreciated her for that. Outside, in the parking lot between the diner and the service station, we paused. The August sun was bright and hot. Cicadas sang in the trees. A semi-truck roared past on Route 1, heading north toward New York. Thank you, Brando said, extending his hand, for seeing me. The actual me, not the photograph. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, almost desperate. Thank you for trusting me with your truth. He started toward his car. A nondescript Ford sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, then stopped and turned back. Mr. Cronkite, can I ask you something? Certainly. Do you ever feel like you're performing? Like Walter Cronkite, the broadcaster, isn't quite the same as Walter Cronkite, the man? There's certainly a version of me that exists for the camera. More authoritative, more composed. But I think the difference is that I get to go home and be just Walter. You don't get that luxury. He nodded slowly. No, I don't. That's the problem, isn't it? Marlon Brando never gets to clock out. Maybe that's what you're looking for on this drive, I suggested. Those moments in diners like this one, where you can clock out for an hour, maybe so. He smiled again, sad but genuine. Take care of yourself, Mr. Cronkite. Keep telling the truth. God knows we need someone to. I'll do my best. You take care as well, Mr. Brando. And for what it's worth, I hope you find what you're looking for. So do I, he said quietly. So do I. He got into his Ford and drove away, heading north on Route 1, just another anonymous car in the afternoon traffic. I watched until he disappeared around a curve, then went to settle up with the mechanic. I never saw Marlon Brando again. Oh, I saw his films, of course. The Godfather years later was a masterpiece. But I never encountered the man himself after that August afternoon in 19... I've thought about that conversation many times over the years, about his question whether the real Marlon Brando still existed or whether he'd been consumed entirely by the performances. I like to think he found his answer. I like to think he discovered that the questioning itself was proof of authenticity, proof that somewhere underneath all the roles and masks and performances, Bud Brando from Omaha was still there, still fighting to be seen. The truth is, we all perform to some degree. We all have public faces and private selves. We all wonder sometimes who we'd be if we could strip away the expectations and obligations and just exist. Brando's struggle was just more intense, more public, more consuming than most people's. But what I learned that day in Ruthie's place wasn't really about Marlon Brando. It was about the fundamental human need to be seen. Not photographed, not recognized, not admired from a distance, but truly seen, acknowledged, known, met as one human being by another, without pretense or performance. That's what he was searching for on that long drive across America. Not fame or fortune or artistic validation, just the simple, profound experience of being nobody special, of being real. I gave him that for an hour in a roadside diner in New Jersey, and in return he gave me a story I've carried for decades. A reminder that beneath every public image, every carefully constructed persona, every performance, there's a human being trying to find their way home. I hope he found it, and if you're listening to this, wherever you are, whatever you're struggling with, remember, the fact that you're asking questions about who you really are is proof that someone's still home. The real you hasn't disappeared. It's just waiting to be seen. Sometimes all we need is someone willing to look.